What if I told you your worst habits aren't flaws? They're just patterns your brain was taught to repeat. You're not broken. You're wired for survival, not sabotage. In the next few chapters, we're going to rewire your mind, reclaim your control, and finally break free from the habits that have held you back. This isn't motivation. This is transformation. Let's begin. How to Break Bad Habits, written by Scarlett Adler. Audiobook by Redesign. Introduction. Why habits shape your life. We are what we repeatedly do. More than goals, intentions, or bursts of motivation, it's our habits that shape the quality of our lives. Whether it's reaching for your phone the moment you wake up, biting your nails during stress, or procrastinating until the last minute, these seemingly small actions aren't random. They're patterns wired into your brain. And while they may feel automatic, they aren't unchangeable. Habits are powerful because they operate below the surface of our awareness. They're mental shortcuts that help us navigate the world with less effort. Our brains crave efficiency, and so we build routines, some helpful, some harmful, to conserve energy. Over time, these routines become our default behaviors. That's why it can feel so frustrating when we try to change something and end up back in the same loop. Why can't I stop doing this? I know it's bad for me, but I keep doing it anyway. The answer isn't lack of discipline. It's how your brain is wired. Neuroscience tells us that every habit follows a simple loop. Cue gives routine, gives reward. A cue triggers the behavior. The routine is the behavior itself, and the reward reinforces the loop. Your brain doesn't just remember the action, it remembers the craving it satisfies. Once this loop becomes encoded in your neural pathways, breaking it isn't just about stopping a behavior. It's about rewriting the script. That's where keystone habits come in. These are habits that once changed, ripple out into other areas of your life. For example, starting a morning workout routine might also improve your sleep, your eating choices, and your confidence at work. Change one keystone habit, and you begin to shift your entire identity. In this book, you won't find unrealistic promises or guilt-driven advice. Instead, you'll discover a clear, step-by-step guide to identifying your bad habits, understanding the emotional and neurological patterns that keep them in place, and most importantly, breaking and replacing them with habits that actually serve you. You'll learn how to change your environment, manage your triggers, and turn failure into feedback. By the end of this journey, you'll not only have tools to break free from bad habits, you'll also begin building the version of yourself you've always wanted to become. Because breaking bad habits isn't just about self-control. It's about self-awareness, self-compassion, and choosing, again and again, to act in alignment with who you truly want to be. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Understanding the habit loop. Have you ever found yourself scrolling through your phone with no memory of picking it up? Or reached for a snack, not out of hunger, but simply because you always do when watching TV? These are habits, automatic behaviors that unfold without much thought. They're not decisions. They're loops. And until we understand how those loops work, we'll keep getting stuck in them. At the heart of every habit is a simple neurological process known as the habit loop. It's made up of 3 parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward. Let's break that down. First comes the cue. This is the trigger that tells your brain to begin a behavior. It could be anything: the time of day, an emotion, a place, or even another person. For example, walking into your kitchen after work might be the cue that kicks off a craving for something sweet. Next is the routine, the actual behavior. This is what you do in response to the cue. In our example, you might open the pantry and grab a cookie, maybe without even thinking about it. Over time, this becomes a reflex. Finally, there's the reward. This is what your brain gets out of the routine. The sugar rush, the feeling of comfort, the temporary relief from stress. It's this reward that reinforces the loop, teaching your brain that next time it wants that feeling, it should do the same thing again. Here's a simple habit loop in action. Cue. You feel bored at work. Routine. You open social media. Reward. A few minutes of distraction and novelty. Or another one. Cue. You feel anxious. Routine. You light a cigarette. Reward. A moment of calm and familiarity. Over time, your brain starts anticipating the reward the moment the cue appears. That's what creates the craving, the deep desire to complete the loop. And the more often you satisfy that craving, the stronger and more automatic the habit becomes. It's not just the action you crave, it's the emotional state it delivers. This process is why your brain often shifts into autopilot when a habit is triggered. It's trying to be efficient, freeing up mental energy for other tasks. That's great when it comes to brushing your teeth or locking the door. But when the habit is harmful, like emotional eating, nail biting, or avoidance through endless scrolling, it becomes a problem. The key point here is this: you can't break a habit you don't understand. Many people try to just stop their bad habits without ever examining what triggers them, what they're really craving, or what reward their brain is chasing. That's like trying to disable a machine by yanking out random wires. You might get lucky, but more often, nothing changes. The good news? Once you start noticing your own habit loops, once you begin seeing the cue, routine, and reward clearly, you gain power. You can pause, reflect, interrupt, and eventually, you can rewire. So before we talk about how to break your bad habits, we have to bring them into the light. In the next chapter, we'll dive into identifying your own patterns, because awareness isn't just the first step, it's the most important one. Let's turn on the lights. Chapter 2. Identify your bad habits. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. Before you can break a bad habit, you need to call it out, clearly, honestly, and without judgment. That's where real change begins. With awareness, many of us carry habits we hardly notice until they cause real problems. Maybe you procrastinate until the stress becomes unbearable. Maybe you scroll endlessly through your phone, numbing out instead of addressing what's really bothering you. Or maybe your habits are quieter, like biting your nails, interrupting people in conversation, or talking yourself down when no one's listening. Bad habits show up in many forms, and they often fall into one of these 4 categories. Physical habits. These are the ones we often dismiss or overlook. Nail biting, overeating, slouching, teeth grinding. They're tied to physical sensations and can become so automatic we barely feel them happen. Emotional habits. Think procrastination, overreacting, or avoiding difficult conversations. These are often triggered by emotions like fear, stress, or boredom. Mental habits. Self-criticism, overthinking, catastrophizing. These patterns live in our internal dialogue and shape how we see ourselves. Social habits. Gossiping, interrupting, people-pleasing, or constantly comparing yourself to others. These often involve how we relate to people and seek validation. To start identifying your own patterns, ask yourself these reflective questions. What do I do when I'm stressed, anxious, or bored? What's something I do regularly that leaves me feeling worse afterward? What behaviors do I try to hide from others, or even from myself? Is there a time of day or place where my bad habits show up the most? These questions aren't meant to shame you. They're meant to shine a light on the habits that no longer serve you. One helpful way to gain clarity is through habit tracking. You can use a journal, a spreadsheet, or one of the many apps designed for this purpose, like Habitica, Loop, or Streaks. Start by simply logging when a certain behavior happens, what triggered it, and how you felt before and after. Over time, you'll start to see patterns. Maybe you reach for snacks when you're bored, or scroll social media every time you feel overwhelmed. Here's a simple exercise to try. Worksheet: My 3 worst habits and why they exist. 1. What are 3 habits you know are holding you back? 2. What triggers each habit? Time, place, emotion, situation. 3. What do you get out of it? Comfort, distraction, relief. 4. How do you feel after you do it? 5. What might this habit be helping you avoid? The goal isn't to beat yourself up. It's to see your behavior clearly. When you recognize your habits and understand the needs they're trying to meet, you're no longer a slave to them. You're now in a position to change them. Awareness is your first superpower. Let's use it. Chapter 3: The Psychology of Resistance. If breaking bad habits were as simple as deciding to stop, you wouldn't be reading this book, and I wouldn't have written it. The truth is, even when we want to change, something inside us resists. That something isn't weakness, it's wiring. Our brains are wired to seek comfort and avoid discomfort. It's a survival mechanism. Habits, especially the ones we've carried for years, offer a sense of certainty. Even when a habit is harmful, it's familiar, it's predictable. It provides relief, even if only momentarily. And to the brain, certainty often feels safer than change. This is why willpower alone usually fails. Willpower is like a battery. It drains quickly, especially under stress. That's why you might make a healthy choice in the morning, but give in to an old habit by evening. If you rely on discipline without changing the underlying system, you're setting yourself up for a cycle of frustration and self-blame. But resistance isn't just physical. It's deeply emotional. We often fear the discomfort that change brings. We fear the unknown. We fear what might happen if we fail. And sometimes we even fear what might happen if we succeed. What if I quit smoking and still feel anxious? What if I stop procrastinating and realize I'm still not happy? These fears create emotional resistance, a quiet but powerful force that keeps us stuck. Another piece of this puzzle is cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort we feel when our actions don't match our values. You tell yourself you want to be healthier, but then you binge late at night. That gap between your goals and your behavior creates tension. To relieve that tension, the brain often takes the easier route, justifying the habit or pretending it's not a big deal. And let's talk about shame and guilt, 2 of the most toxic emotional traps. When we fail to break a habit, we often internalize it. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just stop? That self-blame creates more emotional pain, which ironically drives us right back into the comfort of the habit we're trying to escape. Take Sarah, for example, a 36-year-old marketing executive who'd been trying to quit drinking for years. Every time she made it a few weeks, something would trigger her: a stressful meeting, a lonely evening, an argument, and she'd pour a glass of wine. Then came the shame. I'm weak. I'll never change. That shame made her feel worse, which only reinforced the urge to drink again. It wasn't until Sarah began unpacking the emotional reasons behind her habit, the fear of facing hard feelings alone, that she began to make real progress. Once she stopped judging herself and started observing her triggers with compassion, everything shifted. The first step in breaking resistance isn't pushing harder. It's understanding why it's there. Your resistance isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that your brain is trying to protect you. The key is learning to meet that resistance with awareness, not avoidance. Because once you stop fighting yourself, you can start changing yourself. Chapter 4: Break the cue, change the trigger. Every habit starts with a cue, a trigger that tells your brain, it's time to do that thing again. If you've ever wondered why certain habits seem to appear like clockwork, it's because you're responding to a cue, often without realizing it. The good news? Once you identify those cues, you can interrupt the pattern and steer it in a better direction. Cues come in different forms. Time. You always grab a snack around 3 p.m. Location. You smoke when you step onto your balcony. Emotional. State. You scroll through your phone when you're bored or anxious. Social environment. You. Drink more when you're out with certain friends. These triggers are like signals your brain has learned to respond to with a specific behavior. The more consistent the cue, the stronger the habit loop becomes. The first step is to notice. Start tracking your habits and ask yourself, what was I doing right before I acted out the habit? Where was I? Who was I with? How was I feeling? Awareness gives you power. Once you recognize your cues, you can change how you respond to them. Let's talk strategy. Sometimes the best way to weaken a cue is to change your environment. If scrolling social media is your go-to in bed, consider charging your phone in another room at night. If a certain coworker always triggers gossip sessions, take a different lunch break or shift the topic when the conversation heads in that direction. Another powerful method is to use reminders and interruptions. Set phone alarms, post sticky notes, or use visual cues like leaving a water bottle on your desk to remind yourself to hydrate instead of snacking. But here's the key idea. Don't just remove the habit, replace it. The brain doesn't like a blank space. It wants a routine. This is where the habit swap theory comes in. Instead of scrolling in bed, read a few pages of a book. Instead of stress eating, take a short walk or do a breathing exercise. Instead of reaching for a cigarette, chew gum, or hold something in your hand, the goal is to give your brain a new, healthier routine in response to the same cue. To make these replacements stick, try using cue disruption rituals, small grounding exercises, or anchor habits that shift your state in the moment. For example, when you feel the urge to procrastinate, try the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. Name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. It calms your nervous system and breaks the autopilot. Remember, triggers are powerful, but they're not permanent. When you change what happens after the cue, you slowly rewrite the loop. And every small interruption is a step closer to the habits and life you actually want. Let's start pulling the thread. Chapter 5. Replacing the routine. Install better behaviors. Once you've recognized your triggers, the next step is to rewrite the habit loop. Not by removing the routine entirely, but by replacing it with something better. Habits don't disappear. They get overwritten. If your brain expects a behavior after a certain cue, you need to give it a new, healthier routine to latch onto. The key is to design your new behavior deliberately. That means choosing a routine that's not just better, but also realistic and rewarding enough for your brain to adopt. A powerful framework for this comes from author James Clear, who suggests that for a habit to stick, it should be obvious, make the new routine visible and hard to ignore, attractive, tie it to something you enjoy. Easy, start small so it's not intimidating, rewarding, make it feel good immediately. Let's say your current loop looks like this. Cue, you feel stressed. Routine, you eat junk food. Reward, temporary comfort. Instead of trying to cut the behavior cold turkey, try swapping in a better option. New routine, when stressed, take a 2-minute breathing break or step outside for fresh air. Reward, relief from tension, plus the internal win of choosing something healthy. Even something tiny can create momentum. These are known as tiny habits, and they're surprisingly powerful. Flossing 1 tooth a night, doing 1 push-up, writing 1 sentence. Small actions that seem insignificant, but build consistency and confidence over time. Another powerful technique is habit stacking. This means linking your new behavior to something you already do consistently. For example, after I make coffee, I'll write one sentence in my journal. After I brush my teeth, I'll do 10 squats. After I close my laptop at the end of the day, I'll go for a 5-minute walk. When your brain sees the familiar habit, it uses it as a launchpad for the new one. This pairing makes the new behavior easier to remember and repeat. Also, make the routine emotionally satisfying. If your new habit feels good, even a little, it reinforces the behavior and encourages repetition. Celebrate your success. Say out loud, "I'm proud of myself." Smile. These small moments of reinforcement go a long way. Remember, you don't need to overhaul your entire life in a week. Start with just one loop, one cue, one new routine, one small reward. Replace it intentionally. Do it consistently, not about being perfect. It's about being better than yesterday. With every swap, every stack, every tiny shift, you're training your brain to crave something new. Let's build the habits your future self will thank you for. Chapter 6. Redesign your environment for success. When it comes to breaking bad habits, most people focus on willpower. But the truth is, your environment often has more influence than your motivation. If your surroundings are set up to trigger unhealthy routines, even the strongest intentions will wear thin. On the flip side, when your environment supports the changes you want, success feels almost effortless. Let's talk about visual triggers, the cues you see that nudge you toward a behavior. A cookie jar on the counter is an invitation to snack. A phone on your nightstand is a shortcut to endless scrolling. These little details matter more than we realize. Our brains are constantly scanning the environment for cues. So the question becomes, what are your surroundings encouraging you to do? To build better habits, you need to create a habit ecosystem, an environment that nudges you in the right direction. That might mean leaving your journal on your pillow so you write before bed, or keeping a water bottle on your desk to encourage hydration. Want to read more? Put a book where your phone usually sits. At the same time, remove temptations and add friction to bad habits. The harder it is to do something, the less likely you are to do it. For example, if food delivery is your default, uninstall the app or log out of your account. If staying up late is your struggle, set a phone curfew or plug your charger in across the room. Physical reminders are powerful too. Sticky notes on the bathroom mirror, alarms that remind you to take a break, visual checklists. These tools help keep your intentions top of mind. You can even build in accountability signals, like scheduling workouts with a friend or sharing your goal with someone who'll check in on your progress. Here's a simple example. If your goal is to run in the morning, put your running shoes and clothes right by your bed. When you wake up, the decision is already halfway made. You've reduced the friction. Changing your behavior doesn't always start with changing your mindset. Sometimes it starts with moving a chair, deleting an app, or taping a note to your fridge. You don't have to fight your environment. You can shape it. Design your space to help the habits you want feel easy and the ones you don't a little harder to reach. That's not cheating. That's smart. Chapter 7. Accountability and social triggers. We like to think of habits as personal, private, internal. But the truth is, your social world shapes your habits more than you might realize. We are wired for connection, and our behaviors often mirror those around us, sometimes without even noticing. That's why one of the most powerful tools for breaking bad habits is accountability. Simply telling someone your goal makes you more likely to follow through. It adds a layer of responsibility that you don't want to let down, not just to yourself, but to someone else. When others know what you're working toward, it becomes real. Even better, find a habit buddy, someone who's trying to build or break a habit of their own. You can check in with each other, share struggles, and celebrate wins. Or join a support group, online or in person, where people understand what you're working through. Change feels easier when you're not alone in it. This brings us to the mirror effect. You become the behaviors you see most often. If you're constantly around people who value health, growth, and mindfulness, those habits start to feel normal, even natural. But if your environment encourages gossip, junk food, or avoidance, it's much harder to steer a different direction. Your tribe matters. That's why social reward systems can be so effective. When you share your progress, big or small, and someone says, "Well done," your brain gets a hit of positive reinforcement. It feels good to be seen, and that feel-good moment reinforces the habit you're building. But not all social influence is positive. Negative peer pressure can drag you back into old patterns. Maybe your friends tease you for skipping a night out. Maybe someone says, "Come on, one cigarette won't hurt." These moments test your commitment. They're not just social, they're emotional. Knowing how to respond in advance, or even distancing yourself from certain environments, can make a big difference. Surround yourself with people who want you to win. Find those who celebrate your growth and respect your boundaries. Because in the end, habits aren't built in isolation. They're built in community. And when you use social energy to fuel your progress, breaking bad habits doesn't feel like a burden. It starts to feel like belonging. Chapter 8. When you slip, reframe failure. Let's be honest. No matter how committed you are, you're going to slip. Everyone does. You'll miss a workout, scroll too long, have that extra drink, or fall back into an old routine when stress hits. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. What matters isn't that you slipped. What matters is how you respond. Too often, we treat a slip like a total collapse. Well, I ruined my streak, might as well give up. But that thinking turns one small detour into a complete derailment. The truth? Slips are not disasters. They are data. Every time you fall back into a habit, it's a chance to ask, what triggered it? What was I feeling? What can I do differently next time? Instead of starting over from scratch, take a breath and adjust the strategy. Maybe your environment needs a tweak. Maybe your replacement habit wasn't rewarding enough. Maybe you just had a rough day, and that's okay. A stumble doesn't erase your progress. It just highlights where the road needs reinforcing. This is where reframing failure becomes powerful. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of it. Think of every slip as feedback, not proof that you can't change. Athletes review. Missed shots. Writers edit drafts. You're allowed to revise your approach. 2. Here's a helpful mindset tool. The 2-day rule. It simply means never miss twice. If you skip a habit one day, fine. Life happens. But don't skip it 2 days in a row. Missing once is a mistake. Missing twice becomes a pattern. The 2-day rule helps you stay consistent without chasing perfection. And finally, forgive yourself. Not just in words, but in how you treat yourself. Shame and guilt don't fuel change. Compassion does. Speak to yourself the way you would a close friend who's struggling. Gentle, honest, and encouraging. Because beating yourself up only deepens the emotional rut that the bad habit lives in. Progress isn't linear. It's a messy, winding road, with rest stops, U-turns, and the occasional breakdown. But every time you choose to get back on the path, you're still moving forward. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep showing up. Chapter 9. Deep habits. Breaking the emotional root. Not all bad habits are surface level. Some run deep, tangled in old wounds, unspoken fears, or unresolved emotions. These are the habits that don't just come from routine. They come from pain. And to truly break them, you have to go deeper than behavior. You have to get to the root. Every habit has a trigger. But it's important to distinguish situational triggers from emotional ones. A situational trigger might be walking into your kitchen at night and grabbing a snack. An emotional trigger, on the other hand, might be reaching for that snack when you feel lonely, anxious, or ashamed. One is about context. The other is about what's happening inside. Habits like emotional eating, self-sabotage, or falling into toxic relationship cycles often stem from emotional triggers, patterns we form to soothe, distract, or protect ourselves. These habits once served a purpose, even if that purpose no longer helps you today. Recognizing that can be the first step toward healing. So how do you begin to untangle those deeper roots? Start with self-inquiry. Tools like journaling can help. You explore your emotional patterns. Ask questions like, what was I feeling right before I acted out this habit? What am I avoiding? What do I really need right now? The goal isn't judgment. It's awareness. Therapy can also be a powerful ally, especially when habits are connected to trauma or long-held beliefs about your worth. Exploring shadow work, the process of uncovering the hidden, rejected parts of yourself, can help you understand why certain habits feel so hard to let go. Meditation and mindfulness offer another path. By learning to sit with discomfort instead of reacting to it, you create space between the trigger and the response. That space is where choice lives. It's where change becomes possible. Here's the truth. Until you shift the underlying belief, the behavior will find a way to come back. Maybe you believe you're not enough, not lovable, not safe. And so the habit becomes a coping mechanism. But once you begin to break the belief, the behavior starts to lose its grip. You are not your habit. You are not your pain. And you don't have to carry the same survival tools you once needed. You're safe to let go now. Chapter 10. Sustaining the change. Identity shifts. If you want lasting change, you have to go beyond what you do and start changing how you see yourself. Because the most powerful habits don't come from motivation or discipline. They come from identity. There's a big difference between saying, I want to quit smoking, and saying, I am a non-smoker. The first is a goal. The second is a belief. When your habits align with your self-image, they become much easier to sustain. You don't have to force them. They flow from who you believe you are. This is the heart of identity-based habit change. Every time you follow through on a positive habit, no matter how small, you cast a vote for the kind of person you want to become. One healthy meal, one workout, one moment of resisting an old trigger. These micro wins matter. They reinforce your new identity and help build momentum. So celebrate them. Don't wait for big milestones to feel proud. Start recognizing progress in the everyday choices. Write them down. Say them out loud. Tell a friend. The more you affirm your growth, the more real it becomes. Another helpful practice is future visualization. Picture the version of you who has already let go of the bad habit. What do they look like? How do they think, speak, act? What kind of life are they living? Let that image pull you forward. It's not just about imagining success. It's about stepping into it now, decision by decision. To stay on track, schedule monthly habit audits. Take time to reflect. What's working? Where did I slip? And what triggered it? What have I learned about myself this month? These check-ins help you realign, reset, and recommit. They're not about perfection. They're about staying conscious. And remember, identity is fluid. It's something you shape with every action. The more you act like the person you want to become, the more you believe it's who you are. Change isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more you, the version of yourself that's been waiting underneath the habits that no longer serve you. So keep going. You're not just breaking a habit. You're building a new way of being. Conclusion: you are the author of your habits. Breaking bad habits. isn't about being perfect. It's about becoming aware. Taking action can slowly transforming your life, one small shift at a time. If you've made it this far, then you've already started. You've looked at your behaviors honestly, examined the triggers and emotional roots behind them, and taken steps to replace them with something better. You've learned that habits aren't just routines. They're reflections of your beliefs, your environment, your emotions, and even your identity. And more importantly, you've learned that they can change. You don't have to stay stuck in patterns that make you feel small, defeated, or disconnected. You have the power to rewrite the story. You are not your past behaviors. You are not defined by your slips or setbacks. You are the author of your habits, and that means you can choose what comes next. Every time you pause instead of reacting, reflect instead of judging, or try again instead of giving up, you're stepping into a new version of yourself. This journey isn't just about breaking what's bad. It's about building what's better. And it doesn't end here. Growth is a lifelong process, a series of choices that add up over time. So as you move forward, remember this. Every small shift you make is a vote for your future self. And your future self? They're already proud of you. Now, go live the story only you can write. Thanks for joining us in Read Realm, where every book finds a voice. If you enjoyed this audiobook, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a book in mind? Drop it in the comments. Your next favorite listen could be our next upload. Until then, keep your mind open and your headphones on.